I'm Andy Aledort, and in this edition of In Deep, we're going to look at triadic chord forms. A question that I've gotten a lot from students over time has been, how do I learn my chordal inversions, and then how do I apply those things to a song? How do I connect one chord to the next and have some understanding of how chords work across the whole neck as opposed to in just one area? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at triads and triadic inversions up and down the fretboard across a series of different chords. So let's start with the key of E and an E major triad. So many blues songs are in the key of E and guitar songs because you got a nice big E on the bottom. So it's very important for you to know your triadic chord shapes. Some of you might say, what is a triad? Well, as the name implies, it is made up of 3 notes, and a major triad is made up of the root note. We're in the key of E, so that would be an E note. The major third in the key of E, that's G sharp. And the 5th in the key of E, that's B. So those 3 notes, E, G sharp, B, make up an E major triad. You might ask, how do I know G sharp is the 3rd, and how do I know B is the 5th of E? Well, because these things come from, they're called intervals. They're measures of distance from one note to the next. So if we were to play straight up the E major scale, you would say 1, major 2nd, major 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, major 7th, root note. So 1 is our root note E, 2, 3, the major 3rd, the 3rd note in the major scale, 1, 2, 3. So root, 3rd, and then 3, 4, 5. B is the 5th note of major scale, so B is the 5th. So E is the root, G sharp is the 3rd, B is the 5th. And of course that's going to be true everywhere on the fretboard in any order. The notes certainly don't have to go from E to G sharp to B. It could be any combination of those 3 notes in any order is going to make the sound of an E triad. The best way to learn this, in my experience, is to take a look at each of the shapes that are formed when you move up the fretboard using those 3 notes. So let's take a systematic approach to looking at the triads. We're going to look at adjacent strings in groups of 3, and there are 4 groups. So you have 1st string, 2nd string, 3rd. So that's 1, 2, 3. That's the 1st group. 2, 3, 4 is the 2nd group. 3, 4, 5 is the 3rd group. And 4, 5, 6 is the 3rd group. Obviously, if you said it the other way, 6, 5, 4, 5, 4, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 2, 1. Those are our groups of adjacent strings. And we're doing 3 strings because we have 3 notes in a triad. So the first place, the lowest place on the fretboard on the top 3 strings where you could play an E major triad is here. G sharp, E, G sharp, B, E. The way we find the other shapes is on each of the strings you go to the next note in the triad. So the next note from G sharp would be B. The next note from B would be E. The next note from E would be G sharp. So this goes to this. And then you repeat the process. B, the next note in the triad would be E. On the B string we have an E note, the next note is G sharp. And on the high E string we had a G sharp, the next note is B. So now you have this shape. So we had this. And then you could do it again. And there you have your triad on top, and this is the same as this. So here's the shapes. And then we could keep going. So it's imperative that you memorize those shapes, and it would also be good for you to memorize the note names and their intervals. All right, let's move over to the next group. Remember the notes, we just want to play the notes E, G sharp, and B. So we would have this. And then E goes to G sharp goes to B goes to E. So the next shape would be this. Then that, and then so you have let's go to the next group of strings. We would have B, E, G sharp. And now let's go to the bottom. Now normally when you play an E chord, it's played like that. We're not going to play it that way because when you play the bottom three strings using a typical E chord, you have an E note, a B note, and another E note. So you don't have all three notes. There's no G sharp. So in order to use the same concept and the same process, we have to play a G sharp on the bottom. All right, so as I said, I wanted to apply the concept to a blues. So a blues is a 1-4-5 progression, and in the key of E, the three chords would be E, A, and B. The reason for doing this is, as I said, many students ask about how do I know how to connect chords if I'm playing a song and go from one triad to the next, and how do I memorize them? So a good way, I think, to do this is to use the approach that we just took with all of our E major triads, and then do that with the other chords, the other two chords that are in the three-chord progression of a blues in the key of E. So those other two chords would be an A chord and a B chord, because a blues in the key of E, the one chord's E, the four chord's A, the five chord is B. So now let's look at our A triad shapes, and then we'll look at our B triad shapes. All right, let's take the top three strings. The notes of an A major triad are A, C sharp, and E. And we get those intervals the same way we had gotten them in the key of E. We used an E major scale, so you can use an A major scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 1 is a root note A. The third is C sharp, and the fifth is E. So 1, 3, 5 in the key of A would be the notes A, C sharp, and E. In order to get the next triad shape, we do just as we had done it with E. Each note's going to go to the next higher note in the triad. So A goes to C sharp goes to E goes to A. And then, if you've got it, let's move down to 4-3-2 string-wise. And now we're going to move down to 5-4-3. And similarly, as we had done with E, when we had to put the third in the bass, we have to do the same thing for A. Because if we were to just play a typical cowboy chord, first position, open position, A chord, we would have A, E, A, so that's no good. C sharp, E, A. That's a hard one to get. And now let's go down to the bottom 3 strings. We're going to play this. And then if you want, so there you have all your A triadic shapes. Let's do the same thing with the B. And we're going to start here for B, because this is the same as A, up a whole step. So we have our B root note. D sharp is the 3rd of B. F sharp is the 5th. 1, 3, 5 in the key of B. And we ascertain those notes in the same way as we had done for the key of E and A. We play a B major scale. 1, 2, 3. So B, D sharp, 3, 4, 5. F sharp is the 5. So on the next group of strings, we have this. And then on the next group of strings, one more time we have to put the 3rd in the bass, because we can't play a B root note, the D major 3rd, but then get an F sharp. There's no F sharp this low. We have a G, which is an augmented triad. We don't want that. So we have to start here. On the bottom 3, you could play this. So it's important for you to memorize all of those shapes for each one of those chords.